All right, welcome to a review edition of the Hauger History Podcast. I'm Mr. Hauger on a Friday, reviewing the world before 1750 and some key elements that you should know and review before you come into class to take our review test. And with me are Autumn and Nicole. How are you?
Good.
So, before 1750, we're talking about cultural diffusion and the way that travel changed the world and more nations come into contact. So, I made this connection, and so does our school district, that the world became a much smaller place. What is one way that the world seemed smaller because we had traveled? Yeah, and the ability to trade and get things from countries that are thousands of miles away makes it seem like you're more connected. You can now sell goods that they might want to buy, they can sell goods to you, and now your home is full of things from different continents for the first time ever. That makes the world not seem quite so large. Great. Anything else, Autumn, that you think where the world is changing and seems like smaller because we are traveling and experiencing more travel?
I think the world became a smaller place because there were less places to conquer. There's less land to take power of.
Yeah, that makes sense too. So there's less undiscovered area. There's more conflict between nations. There's more colonization that's happening. That's 3 or 4 different reasons. People can, if they have money, can now travel and see new cultures, meet new people. Religions start to spread all over. So there's 5 or 6 reasons that could be helpful as you review that question. Nice job, you guys. We read in class a primary source from King James, 1610 of England, talking about addressing his parliament and said, one thing is the most supreme thing on earth. What was he talking about?
Monarchy and basically, if you're king, you really rule over everything.
Yes, that being a king was basically the best thing you could be, that you have the most power, you're the head of the body of man. And yeah, it's a pretty extreme thing to say that you're on the divine level of gods and that you're accomplishing that much. So great job.
I wouldn't like to be God, let's be real.
Wow, there you go. Students want more power is what I'm hearing. And also hearing that they want more noise and volume, and they get that when they want it. All right, so here we are after the class has left and the noise has also exited the room, so we can finish up. 3 facts about 3 Renaissance figures with accomplishments that impressed people then and now. So here's one of the things that students that don't watch the podcast are going to give me really brief answers and not read the whole question, which if I could give you one little skill for college and later is make sure you fully answer the question. So I want to know, who's a historic Renaissance person? What do they do? And why did it matter then and now? So it might take a long sentence or a detailed sentence to get it. So we did in our class a dinner party where they each played historical roles. Let's start with you, Autumn. Who did you play during that project?
I played Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Elizabeth I. Okay, so what is something she accomplished that was powerful, or how did she change the world in her time?
Well, she was queen and she didn't have a king, and I think that is something that's very interesting because it's breaking that gender stereotype where she could be the only one in power and not have to have a man there to justify what she's doing.
So that's a really good answer. And because she was successful, the monarchy continued. So she kept in place a system of government that endured, where some rulers failed and then they collapsed. So there's 1. You need 3. So Nicole, who did you play in the dinner party? That's right. And that's your perfect then and now answer, in that because of his philosophies became used by Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, we live in a country that's founded on his principles and philosophies. Perfect answer. There were a dozen others. So if you talk Shakespeare, you could say he wrote a bunch of plays and that became a way that we enjoy theater today. If you talked about Galileo, his science laid the foundation for scientists after him. It's really about how you're going to explain it and how you're going to... Okay, so this one's a simple list question. What are 3 empires that changed the world because they traveled out and colonized and traded? We start with Portugal and Spain because they divided the world with the Treaty of Tordesillas and said, I can have this half, you can have that half, and they were dominant for so long. And some other countries that you guys might name?
England and France.
Solid?
Netherlands.
Good. So there's the European powers all touring around, tearing the country apart and the world apart, grabbing their pieces to control. Nice. Good stuff. We're halfway done. What are the 3 effects of these empires? So maybe we start with Autumn and say all of this trade, this travel, this mercantilism, the beginning of capitalism, how did this impact the rest of the world? How did it impact history?
Well, there caused slavery, and so it caused the trading of people and disease and a lot of things like that, and rats.
Okay, you said a lot of things there. So disease for sure is great. Not that disease is great. That really sounds insensitive. But it is impactful, and it reverses the way of people being isolated. So germs, disease, smallpox, so many different things come into contact.
Remember, disease brings
Two. But yep, you're right. So disease is a thing that you could mention. You mentioned the rats and the vermin and mosquitoes that got transferred continent to continent. That was a big deal that started overrunning native species. What else, Nicole?
just basically just like a lot of new things that we could get, like new crops, new animals.
Oh, good. That's a good one. What are some of those crops? There's many. So many noises. From America, squash, potatoes, tobacco. From Europe, chickens, cattle, citrus that became harvested in the Bahamas, and sugar plantations. So lots of different things changed. And that really changed like the way countries made money, who became powerful, who didn't. And then obviously slavery became a big impact there too. Solid. There's a ton more that you could talk about if you review your notes that'd be applicable here. Amazing. It's like every possible sound. So let's discuss then, the last two questions are pretty similar with the Columbian Exchange. And how did it change the economies and cultures of the world? Culturally, I'll start you out with that. This is kind of the first time people start to mix from different nations, and they marry, they have relations, they have children, they have offspring that hadn't really been a thing because we had never come into contact with each other for many, many years. Travel and trade made that possible. So culturally, that makes sense. You also trade items of culture like religion, philosophy, inventions, and innovation. How did it change economies then? So how did this triangle trade change the way that countries make money? Nicole, if I start with Autumn this time.
Goods that they could sell and trade with other countries.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, suddenly instead of trading to just people you could walk to their homes, you could now find a trader who could take your goods worldwide. And it was kind of like an early access to an internet of sorts, because now people far away who don't have access to the fruits or vegetables or fibers or trees, you could craft goods with your hands that might become really valuable or rare or exotic or expensive and feed your family or your culture or your village. And sometimes that was a good thing, and then sometimes it was a bad thing because you'd bring attention from people who could come in and steal what you had or dominate or tax you. And so it was an opportunity and possibly a drawback too. That's really good. How do you think it changed the economy of like Africa, for example, then? I mean, if they're the ones that were traded with guns and rum and then people were imprisoned and enslaved, what does that do to those countries and their economy or their chance to be economically successful? What it also did was once there were a run on how many people were available to be captured, it turned country against country in the interior of Africa with people looking to enslave enemies or debt or prisoners or people who had been in trouble. So it created a network of reliance on capturing people and being sold into slavery, which is pretty awful to think about. But you also said that while those countries were losing, other countries were started to make tremendous gains because they were having labor that was free or reduced cost and could make goods at a greater quantity for a lesser price, and profit became a thing where it's like we could sell millions of pounds of goods instead of just people around you in your town. So I guess you could say the economy scaled up, the scope of trade expanded in a huge way, and you could look at the modern connection, not with slavery, but with business, where everyone became reliant on Amazon, and now you can get 2-day shipping almost anywhere in the country. If you make something, you could sell it almost anywhere in the world, and that really changes how money changes hands. Cool. I think you guys nailed it. I think you have a really good handle on how to prepare for this. Reviewing notes is good, checking back, maybe talking with a friend, reviewing this video. And I think everyone should be pretty well prepared for those 7 questions. I want to thank Nicole and Autumn for being here today. It was really helpful and thoughtful. Usually we have more jokes and play more games, but I think when we study stuff like this, there's a certain amount of seriousness that comes along with the material. Do you guys agree? It's like some things are not really made humorous, and some things are really about acknowledging that like the world we are in today, where we have worldwide connections, comes from this period. So thanks so much for joining us. All right, until next time, guys. The phone's ringing. Class dismissed. Catch you later.